if you care even a teeny tiny bit about your electronics, do not attempt to do anything that I'm doing in this video. Don't do it. Just don't. Hi, YouTube. I had to turn the air conditioner off just to record this, and I can feel the sweat. Like, I'm starting to glisten already, so this is going to be real fun. This is a functional Nintendo 64 controller for use on the Nintendo Switch console. This is a USB Nintendo 64 controller. That is to say, it's not official, it's bootleg, whatever you want to call it. It's not a Nintendo 64 controller. It's a USB controller shaped like a Nintendo 64 controller, but I do very much appreciate the days of yore where we had colorful, transparent plastic. So my goal here today, with the very little experience I have in electronics, but you know, I have some experience in crafting in general, we're gonna try and do, it won't be simple, but a shell swap between these two controllers. I want to be able to use the beautiful, transparent red, but I need the innards of this guy. The shell itself, should be about the same shape, so that's what I'm hoping for here. I should mention this controller, I bought it off of AliExpress. It was like $10. I do not recommend these. They're not particularly good, even if you're just trying to buy a USB controller to use on like your computer. Get something better. Like, it's cute, but get something better. Nintendo 64 is my favorite console. It always has been since it came out. Part of it's probably nostalgia, but I love Nintendo 64 games, so having Nintendo 64 games on the Switch console, thumbs up from me. Banjo-Kazooie especially, just thank you. I'm gonna have some tools at my disposal. I've got my tri-wing screwdriver things, which you need for Nintendo products, generally speaking. I've got like Dremel drill situation, I got resin if I need it, I've got my brain, and also importantly, I have my Rain Total Body Fuel, which I actually desperately need to take a sip of because it is so hot. This video is sponsored by Rain Total Body Fuel. I feel like I've hyped them up 10 times over, but if you haven't heard, love this energy drink, so good. So thank you, Rain Body Fuel. Nintendo, if you're seeing this, and I dissect your controller and I destroy it, my apologies. In the future, you may consider making controllers in the color that I want them to be, and I won't have to do that. I'm just gonna have at it. I didn't do any preparation. So I started basically just by looking closely and comparing the two controllers. The shape of them is pretty much one-to-one. The really primary difference here is that top section where the rumble pack would go on an original N64. But as of now, I'm still thinking I can work through it. I then take apart each of the controllers. This is a pretty easy disassembly. They have screws holding the two halves of the shell together, and then the ribbon cables are not attached to the shell in either instance. So once you have them unscrewed, it's basically just popping out the little plastic pieces and the buttons underneath them. The red controller in this instance was notably more flimsy in the plastic, you could tell it was far cheaper. So then I worked out which parts I would have to cut out, and I'm looking, and at this point I really decided I don't think I could do what I'm hoping to do here. There's a really expansive set of seats in the top part of the Nintendo controller for Nintendo Switch Online. The seats hold the LEDs, the rumble, and getting those into the red controller, impossible. What I'd have to do is kind of take a mold of the original Nintendo controller, and I don't think that would be doable. Plus, I don't know that I want to do that. I just don't think that's a good idea. So anyway, I'm being super not careful, not procedural about unplugging everything here, but there's essentially two ribbon cables, a couple other small plugs, and the entire board is screwed into the plastic. So just unscrewing it and everything comes apart fairly easily. Okay, so Shell swap attempt number 1. I think I'm gonna declare a little bit of a bust. I don't know that this would be able to handle everything that I'd have to do to it, to be very honest. So we're changing the mission here a little bit. Now that I've taken it apart, might as well do something with this, right? I've always wanted to see if I can dye, not paint, dye the plastic of a controller. So poly dye, they make those. I don't have one handy. I wasn't prepared to do this right now, but I'm going to use what I have handy, and I happen to have this RIT. It's a fabric dye, but it does say that it works on nylon. It's like an all-purpose dye, and I'm hoping if we use this, let it sit for long enough. I can't get it too hot. You know, ideally with fabric, you want to essentially put it into almost boiling hot water for it to adhere. I don't want to melt any piece of this, especially not some of the slightly more delicate seats up here that hold the LEDs and stuff. So I'm going to do what I can, and I'm always really wanted to know about dye on these things because I'm not crazy about doing a paint job on this. Other people have like perfected the art of it. I haven't, and I'm a sweaty person. I'm a sweaty, grimy person. My hands will rub that paint off right good, even if I coat it however I need to coat it. So we're gonna attempt this. Let's see how it goes. Godspeed. In an ideal world, you'd really want to basically cook these in hot water, but of course I'm trying to be a little careful here, so it's not actually particularly hot here. I waited just to the steam point. And then I waited a lot. And I just kept stirring, agitating it, and hoping some of that color would pick up on there. It did not. So I took a break while that was sitting in there, and I decided to paint with this, I guess you would call it a UV activated resin enamel. It's gel nail polish. Gel nail polish works quite well. Just make sure you seal it with some clear gel. Unfortunately, I think this was a bust. Hasn't taken any color. Plan C. And then I headed out to Walmart. Synthetic. So this is my last hope for dyeing, DYE dyeing. It's a synthetic dye. The other dye I had was like an all-purpose dye, which would work on some nylons, but not all poly. I don't know, but this should work in theory. And if it doesn't work, don't worry, because I got some Pokemon cards to make me feel better. For some reason, the instructions on this one say to add dish soap. Okay. Let's hope these pulls are not an indication of how this dyeing project's gonna go. Give it a little longer, but the color's looking so cute. Okay, it has been a while. I'm so excited. They look so good. It's such a pretty green color. I'm so pleased. I'm actually just going to turn the heat off, but let these sit in here until the water cools quite a bit. I left this clip in here with my chicken nuggets because I was feeling so good. I was feeling so good at this point. I was so happy with how everything was coming along. I really felt like we were on the path to success. Look how gorgeous the dye color came out. It's like solid. It's not coming off. That is exactly what I wanted. And then I looked at the front. And my world shattered. You can see it just got warped, and the worst part about this is that it was doing just fine until that last period where I had it sit while the water cooled down. I just had it sit in one spot for too long, and that did it. So in a last-ditch attempt, I took out the heat gun and I attempted to heat it up, but I forgot my heat gun is broken. It gets way too hot. And so I'm like doing a little pass through, and it just gets worse, and the plastic starts bubbling. So many bad things were happening. And so it was about this point where I recognized there was nothing that could be done. This shell is dead. It is, no, game over for that thing. Done goofed. In one last desperate attempt, I put it back in the water to see if I could reheat it, but it doesn't work. I'm gonna open more Pokemon cards now. Due to depression, I've opened like 30 or so of these Pokemon Go packs and I haven't gotten a Ditto, so maybe if I can get a Ditto, I'll feel a little bit better about today. No thank you, no thank you, no thank you, no thank you, no thank you. We got Pikachu in his cute little hat. No, no. Come on. Here we go. Something. Not really. It's a Sylveon Reverse Holo and a rare. I really want that Ditto. Not Ditto. Okay. Not gonna lie. Still a little sad. Gonna charge my camera and return. Hopefully with better news about my little controller situation. Back in business. Have you ever heard of kintsugi? It's the thing where you have broken pottery, it's Japanese, and you repair it like with gold leaf or something so the cracks all show gold and it's just beautiful. Well, this is my version of kintsugi. Let me show you. Real talk, I'm losing it a little bit. It is 11 p.m. I started this at like 2 p.m. However, I've come up with a new game plan. Behold. Ooh, beautiful, right? Right? I think we got something here. Maybe. Probably not, but I have no other options. So this is actually, in my opinion, the fun part, because due to desperation, I get to use the hot glue gun. And I've become pretty proficient with the hot glue gun over the years of cosplaying, let me tell you. And, you know, it's not something you want to use in general with electronics, but this isn't a heat generating controller. It's not going to melt unless I leave it in a hot car somewhere or anything like that. So as long as you're careful not to get the hot glue over anything important, do it up. Of course, this isn't great for longevity purposes, but it is what it is. And so at this point, I'm just fitting everything back in, making sure it all goes in nice and snug like it should. At this point, all good for the most part. The buttons are all going in fine. The pads are going in fine. The back plate needs a little bit of finessing, some melting of plastic, some finagling here and there, some drilling down. But in general, everything can be screwed back in and it's okay. I will say, reconnecting the ribbon cables, huge pain in the butt, but it is what it is. Hi everyone. It is a new day, both figuratively and literally. New can of rain to start it off. Woohoo! So for my sanity, I needed to take a break from the controller last night. I was not having a good time. Just like everything that could go wrong was continually going wrong. Obviously, I killed the first controller shell. It is dead. I spat on its corpse and it's gone. Well, it's not actually, it's in the other room, but it's unusable at this point. I'm trying to salvage pieces of it that I really kind of need for the seating of all of the parts on the new controller. I got bad Pokemon card pulls yesterday. I got a little burn on my pinky finger. See that? Anyway, got that all out of my system, all the sadness, all of the frustration. It's a new day. We're going to do something good today. We're going to continue this project and see it through to some extent. I don't know if we'll see it through successfully, but we'll see it to the end nonetheless. Let me show you where we've left off. Ba-ba-da-ba. So, okay, all things considered, like it's half built right now. Looks like a controller, right? All things considered, could be worse. knowing what I did yesterday, could be worse. We appear to have a functional analog stick. The gold looks very nice on it. I'm a little bummed that the green didn't work out, because this gold and this green, like, that would have looked so good, but it's okay. We're making something beautiful in a different way. It's fine. The die, actually, I just want to mention, it worked incredibly well. The die, gorgeous. The color was like just clean. This beautiful green across the board. If I didn't melt the controller, great. It didn't even fully melt, it just, warped a little bit. Now, what I did yesterday was I reseated all of the buttons and various components back here. We've got, this is the rumble, our power is in here. It's all together right now. Unfortunately, I'm really not happy with how the buttons are seated. I was testing them as I went. My trigger buttons were great, my shoulder buttons, and then at some point my left started getting caught on something, so I have to figure that one out. My D-pad's okay. It's functional. It's a little loosey-goosey, but it's in there. Here's my thing. The start button, I perfected it. I worked so hard to make sure it was seated perfectly, so it had the right amount of click, and at some point when I added everything else in on top of it, it got scrunched down, the components, so now I believe it's permanently pressed, so I definitely have to reseat that. The other buttons, I've been working really hard to get in here seated well. I'm pretty happy with the C buttons. I'm telling you, this took hours because the components that I'm adding into the back are not meant to work with this shell, so it was really hard to get them seated the way that I wanted them to be. So the C buttons I'm okay with. They are definitely clicking at the right depth and whatnot. They're not perfect, but they're okay. A and B are functional right now, but they are really close, like, to being, you can see it, I hold it down, to being pushed in and getting stuck under the edges, so I'm not super happy with them, but at least they're functional. But regardless, I do have to, unfortunately, sadly, open this back up for the start button, which is, I can't do anything with right now. However, what I want to do before I do that, something I haven't done yet, I'm terrified to do, is at this point all of the electronics are in here. I'm going to plug it in and make sure it still turns on. I have 100% been inappropriately manhandling the circuit board on this thing. Even if it turns on, I don't know if it's functional, but I at least want to know it turns on before I proceed with everything else I'm doing. It should be said, if it hasn't already been said, if you care even a teeny tiny bit about your electronics, do not attempt to do anything that I'm doing in this video. Don't do it. Just don't. I felt it was worth the risk, and this is what I've come out with, and I don't know if it's functional, so I'm just saying don't follow my lead here. Just be a little smarter than me sometimes. I've got a USB-C here. That's what these bad boys charge on. Fingers crossed. Hopefully it doesn't zap me or anything. This is a good thing. So what's being lit up right now, there's a charging light. You really can't see it right here. You can kind of see it. It's orange. It is turning on. Good news. But I guess I don't know from this whether the controller's turning on, do I? Okay, well, you know what? We're going to take that as a good sign for right now. And worry about it later. We know that it's accepting the power. And doing what with it? I'm going to go back to the other room where the air conditioning is. BRB. So now it's really game time. Now we have to get everything seated correctly. I managed to get it all seated, but not great. So this is where I had to get a little bit more creative. You literally used a hole punch to get some cardboard circles cut out and attached them to my D-pad and to the back of all of my buttons. I gave the A and the B buttons a little bit extra padding because the issue was I wasn't getting enough depth with them to trigger on the board because of the seating difference between the two controller shells. So by adding these circles, it gave me just the right depth, at least for the buttons. The D-pad could probably have used a little more finesse, but it's fine. This was a really good workaround for what I was doing. And the hot glue, Technically, I probably could have done without the glue, or definitely could have used a different glue, but in this instance, I just didn't want the cardboard to accidentally wiggle around, especially when I was assembling it, so it was a good little addition. Now to cut these, if you copy this, make sure you're using ventilation of some kind, have a lot of air movement, because I'm using a hot knife, essentially. Technically, it's a wood burning tool, but I'm literally just melting through the plastic because clipping it would have taken a long time and I risked cracking it, so melting seemed the smarter way to do. It was a lot of fitting it on, checking it out, seeing what else had to be moved or cut out of the way, and going from there. I first did it on the red one, then I traced that and did it on the green one because I needed those delicate parts on the top part of the green one in order to fit all of the pieces of the board that go in there, in the rumble pack especially. So as I went, I just did a little by little because I didn't want to overcut at any point. And eventually I had something more or less that fit in with one another. So at that point, I started attaching everything back to the main front of the controller shell and checked as I went to make sure that the buttons were just responsive. At this point, I wasn't really seeing how responsive they were or what they were doing. I was just trying to make sure that they did something. And once I felt pretty comfortable with all of that, I did basically my final connection of screwing the pieces together, making sure everything lit up. At one point during this process, I didn't video it, but I had to reopen everything because these LEDs weren't working because one of my ribbon cables came loose. Just a big pain, but once I was very confident that they were all connected more or less correctly, I went ahead and screwed on one green screw. Only one of them still fit. And then I connected the red back and I glued those together once they were in place, very carefully to make sure no glue got on the board. And then when I felt super comfortable in how everything was going, I started adding the screws back in to connect the red shells together. I couldn't do it too tight, but this is what I came up with. Another day, another rain. I'm choosing deliberately to not count the amount of time I've spent on this project. Instead, I'm just measuring it in rains. This is my 4th rain of the project. Ready? Behold! Da 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 da! We now have our very own limited edition. In fact, there's only one of these in the world, I'm pretty darn sure. Nintendo 64 controller for use with the Nintendo Switch system, specifically, ideally for the Nintendo 64 games for Nintendo Switch Online. Isn't it just a beaut? Held together with state-of-the-art hot glue. Oh, beautiful. We've got this gorgeous enamel coating going on with this gold, the sparkles. We can see straight through this beautiful transparent red for some more hot glue. But really, what we need to know at this point is, does it work? All of the buttons are reactive and feel pretty good, except 3 buttons, which I've given up hope on. I'm thinking I probably damaged the circuit board some point somewhere down the line. I actually reconnected the ribbon cable for this LED 2 times until it was like finally seated correctly, and I only know that it's seated correctly because of the LED, and I was hoping that that was what was controlling these 3 buttons, but all 3 of them, no matter what I do, they do nothing. So I believe I have damaged something beyond repair for these 3 guys: the home button, the reset or connecting button, and the screenshot button. Now the good news is, when it comes to gameplay, those 3 buttons are the least important, probably. Let's boot up the Switch and hope, good vibes only, good vibes only. We're gonna play some Banjo-Kazooie. I love Banjo-Kazooie so much that I put on this sweatshirt to film this, even though it is still 90 degrees in here. And I'm gonna pull up the Nintendo Switch Online, Nintendo 64 console. I was playing Pokemon Unite. I can't stop. I just play Pokemon Unite all the time. I would not dare, let me download the update for this. I would not dare try and play anything other than the Nintendo 64 games with this controller. It wouldn't go well. It would not. By the way, there's definitely some stuff I could have done and I considered doing. I just really don't have time to do it right now, but let me know if you want a part 2. I was thinking I could essentially replace the hot glue in these cracks with resin, and I was thinking I would do gold resin to match this gold around the analog stick. Wouldn't that just be so beautiful? Aesthetic wise, I actually kind of don't hate it. I actually think it's kind of interesting looking, but you tell me what you think. Okay, functional, good news, it's working. All right, close this. I just hit B, that worked. We are now N64 controller exclusive. Let's see. You know what I'm going for here. Please be functional. What I'm most concerned about is the D-pad, because this is the original D-pad from the Nintendo controller, and the D-pad in the controller, the host shell, if you will, was a little bit bigger, so there's a tiny bit of wiggle room here, and I feel like I might be pressing multiple of these when I'm intending to press just one, but we'll see. Game 1. I need to skip this. Let me skip it. I can't skip it. I think that is the cutscene. Okay, we're ready to test this out. I'm pretty confident in the analog stick working, to be honest. Yeah, because I didn't really do anything to the analog stick. I just unplugged it and plugged it back in. So good news, the most important, and in my opinion, like the easiest way to like ruin your N64 is having a bad analog stick. So we're good here. Good on the analog stick. I'm not liking, my finger is like hitting this rough patch. Ow, it's actually sharp, this sharp patch of jagged plastic and hot glue. So that's something to be a little concerned with. Might want to fix that up, flatten it out a little bit for future updates. We already know the analog stick works, so let's give me a good jump. A works. A, B. Ah-ha-ha. Let's try ZR. Ah. Oh boy. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Let's try some of the ones I'm a little more concerned about. Let's try, well, okay. I'm not too worried about the C buttons, the arrows up here actually. They feel good. After I put like some special padding, I paid a lot of attention to how these were seated because I didn't like how they were seating naturally in this shell. And I'm pretty happy with how my buttons turned out. Why am I rumbling? Oh, because Kazooie was pecking Banjo's head, right. Okay, down, good, up, good. Very, very pleased here. Good, okay. And now D-pad does nothing in this game, so maybe that was a bad example. All around happy with this stuff so far. Now the good news actually, so even if the D-pad is messed up, is that you don't need it. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I don't think you need it for pretty much any Nintendo 64 game. None of the ones that I play regularly. Like, I don't need it in Ocarina of Time. I don't need it in Banjo-Kazooie, as far as I can remember. ZR on this controller is actually this teeny tiny button up here, which works. Ooh, can I use the D-pad on this actually? I bet I can. Yeah, that's not a good sign. That's not great. What's happening there when I hit down? Give it a little closer up. Oh, it went a little down. It's wanting to go to the side, I think. Up. I gotta push a little harder than I wish I did, but it's functional. It's going just, oh. You know, it's okay. It's okay. We don't need it. It's fine. It's okay. That's what the analog stick's for. So what did we learn this week kids, you don't have to do the thing. You don't have to try if it feels like the payout might not be worth it. If you're not confident in taking apart electronics, don't do it. I'd really love to try this dyeing method again with like little or no heat. It looks real sick, right? Doesn't this look really cool? Nobody has a controller like I have, so I don't want to hear it. I'm just happy it's functional. I can still play games with this and it feels good. The buttons, I worked really hard on getting them seated correctly. The buttons feel good, the analog stick feels good. That's all I need. The rumble works, it connects fine, it holds a charge fine. I'm happy, to be very honest. I'm happy with this. And at the end of day one, I was really not happy. I was like, wow, I just wasted a controller and an entire day of working on this. But now I feel a lot better. I'm pleased. Except with the D-pad. But again, D-pad Shmee-pad. Again, sponsored by Rain. Thank you, Rain, for sponsoring this video. Still delicious. I'd like to say I'm going to go play some N64 games, but really I'm going to go clean up the gigantic mess that I created in creating this controller. Let me know down below if you want a part 2 of like how upgrading this a little bit with some resin maybe and some paint and stuff like that. I don't know if that's something I would even want to watch, but you tell me. And again, just thank you so much for watching. Love you. Mwah. Diku, diku, diku. Da-na-na-na-na-na. 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 Da-na-na-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun. Da-na-na-na-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun.